last minute, and then I'll start.
I see 16 folks here. Sixteen, 17. Patrick, 18.
All right, we can go ahead and get started when maybe the last few will trickle in as we get just past 1 o'clock. Welcome everyone. It's our last week. Thank you all for continuing to attend and engage with us. I will just start us in prayer for our last week, hand it over to Regina, who will then hand it to our presenter for our last session here together. This is a prayer again. Most of the prayers most weeks have been coming from this Redeeming Administration by Anne Garrido, and this week is from the chapter on reflection. O Lord, the highway of life moves very quickly for us. There is much we want to accomplish this week, this month. There are many places we need to go and many people we want to see. And yet, there are all sorts of speed bumps molded into the roads we travel, asking us to slow down, to look around before accelerating again. Help us to welcome the moments when our jobs demand pause, assess, our jobs demand we pause, assess, and consider. Help us, rather than seeing unnecessary obstacles, to embrace these opportunities to grow in reflectiveness. Open our eyes to all these moments, to all that these moments illuminate for us as administrators in our institutions and as disciples in your reign. Amen.
Thank you, Bailey. And I want to say congratulations. We have gotten to the end of this fabulous journey, stretching our knowledge as folks who have HR responsibilities. And this is a wonderful achievement because it showcases your commitment to fulfilling your HR responsibilities in a correct, appropriate, and effective manner. You want to be the best person carrying out your HR responsibilities, whether you're serving as a pastor, a bookkeeper, an administrator, an administrative assistant, or principal of a school. So whatever role you're playing in your organization and carrying out HR responsibilities, it's always for us, for you and me, to remember the significant impact you have on shaping the work environment and enhancing the experience of your employees, how important that is. Justice in the workplace, and a big part of that is respect for the individual. Approach your work with empathy, understanding, and a focus on creating a positive and inclusive workplace culture. Stay curious and open-minded, as the HR field is always evolving, presenting continuous learning opportunities. It doesn't say the same. So if you have HR responsibilities, you have to have your eyes open for what are the trends, what are the needs, what's happening. It's essential to remember you are working with real people who have their own challenges and aspirations. And here, be a trusted member of the team, an attentive listener, and a problem solving for both the employee and the management. Keep seeking opportunities for professional growth. This is what you have done so far. Stay abreast of HR trends, laws, policies to continuously grow in your role. Appreciate the profound impact that your work has on the lives of others. So congratulations again on this journey. It's almost over, but congratulations that you've gotten this far. Bailey will soon, I will soon send you a link to the certificates to a survey. Once you complete the survey, I will get the certificates to you, but participants are required to complete the survey. And then you will have an opportunity to receive this achievement, certificate of achievement. So if you have any questions about the survey or the certificate, just let me know. So here's my question, my weekly question. What's your takeaway from our session last week? Could you please put in the chat? Oh, okay, so true. Working for the church is not for everyone. So true. I've been working for the church, what, 40, 50 years? Yep. Richard, how about for you? Yeah, how important it is to know where they stand. That feedback is so important. Set expectations, review progress, evaluate progress. Yep. I love that because it's all about helping the employee grow and develop. Okay, I like that. Yes, thank you, Amanda, for reminding me. Signature doesn't mean agreement, but the employee received the evaluation information. They might not agree with the evaluation, but the signature indicates, yes, I have received it. Healthy boundaries, okay. Ongoing observation is different than micromanaging. Okay, because when I read that, I'm thinking, praise what you want to raise. Catch people doing the right thing, not micromanaging. Communication, yep, so clue. There needs to be an ongoing communication regarding job responsibilities and expectations. Some of those responsibilities may change, or people forget what they're responsible for, what the expectations are. Healthy boundaries are required for the job. Okay. That would be good, maybe, Richard, to clarify some of what are those healthy boundaries. So that's what I'm seeing here. So I think you're on now, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Again, welcome. Again, thank you for the honor of being with you. We're finally reaching the final stages here. Before we go on, do anybody have any questions or clarifications from the last session that we had? Did I confuse anybody? Okay, let me take you back to one topic that I think I did not cover sufficiently, and I reflected on this after our last session, and I'm going to refer to the 360-degree review as you do an evaluation. I mentioned it, I skimmed over it a little bit, but I thought I'd go back and just take really quick few minutes to review that and kind of explain a little bit further. Primarily because in most cases, people may be reluctant to use that 360-degree input. So basically what that process would call for is perhaps in the interim review that you do between one period and another is to discuss with the employee the possibility of doing 360-degree review which means soliciting input from people that he or she has worked with, provide service for, or who you feel comfortable with. So typically, depending on the size, the way this would work is you would work with the employee, and then there's the communication part, is explain to the employee the fact that it's great that I'm available to review what you're doing, but it's always good to find out what your customers feel about you. Now, in doing this, the process calls for you, the manager, to bring up 3 or 4 names, and also the uh, employee bring up 3 or 4 names that you can solicit information from. Very critical to this is the confidentiality of using this process. This is why I normally mention that it's optional, because if there's any leaking of information that somebody may give you by name, that destroys the whole process. So typically what you tell the employee, you and I are going to decide on, say, 5 or 6 employees that we're going to solicit information from. This information that they provide to me will be confidential. I will only refer to it in general terms, such as out of 7 inquiries that we did, we received 5 responses. And this is what they feel about your level of work or your contribution to the parish. So that's basically how you do it. In doing that, once you decide who those people are, then you need to notify the people that you're soliciting input and ask them to provide that input. If you look at Exhibit 7, which is one of the forms that you had last week, and I asked to be distributed this week, it's a 360-degree view form that you would send to the person providing input. And then the form itself has a name, it says explanatory at the top. And the instruction is as previously discussed, and this is where you have to contact each one of those persons that are going to be providing input. As previously discussed, you've been selected by management and the above employee as a participant in the 360-degree input process. You're being asked to provide factual feedback regarding the employee's performance. Feedback is primarily related to the key areas of the stated employee's individual performance requirements, and that's based on the performance plan that you have. The input you provide will be used as one factor by which to evaluate the above employee's performance. So one very clear, you want to make it very clear to the employee that that's only one part of the evaluation process. You're not going to take somebody's word for it 100%. And B, the information you provide will be used together from input from others and will be referred to on a general basis. Input by name will not be disclosed, and this is the confidentiality part. So these are some of the questions that would be asked that you would ask that employee to provide to you. Again, so you ask them to confidentially send that to you. That's what you would collate once you receive it and use that as part of the basis for your evaluation. This is what I referred to as the touch and feel part, not the micromanagement part. So you're getting input from others. For example, you might solicit input if the person is in accounts receivable, ask information from those who that person deals with, either internally or externally. You might want to ask the pastor, input from the pastor or the priest that that person deals with. There's a variety of people that you might want to both agree. The important thing is that you and the employee have to agree on those employees that will providing input. You want to make sure that you take the bias away as much as possible. Any questions on that? Everybody pretty clear? Good. So I have to tell you, this is very effective. I've used it almost religiously for the last 20 years, I would say. And I've never found it to be a problem as long as I maintain that confidentiality. As long as you explain to the employee what the purpose is and how it's going to be handled, you won't get any pushback from the employee at all. So it's a very effective tool. Keep that in mind. You have any questions, by all means, we'll be glad to go over that again. Any other questions on last year's session? Okay, we can now get on to our next one. So this is the session coming up. Bear with me. Can anybody see that? No?
Nope.
Okay,
Have to hit share, that little red button, I think.
I did, but for some reason it didn't come on.
Jessica, are
So,
you there?
let me try
Yeah,
again.
yeah, you
There
should
we
have
go.
the, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, right now we can just see the white page,
Yeah,
not your presentation though.
something happened here. Bear with me.
Mhm.
Still can't see it?
We could see.
We can see it, but just the, not the, it's still like in the edit stage. Oh, wait, now we see the email box. There you go. If you push play, where is the play button on that one? There we go.
Can
Now
see
you got
that?
it.
There we
Mhm.
go.
You're
Okay,
all set.
sorry about that. I'm not a technical guy, so bear with me as I mentioned before. Okay, here we go with the final session. Again, I've used this page before. So what we're going to be talking about is what I call performance management 2, which is managing the marginal or unsatisfactory performer. And this is a very important topic, goes along with the last session that we had, because this is the follow-on. Managing marginal unsatisfactory performance, the objectives are to understand first the definition of a marginal and unsatisfactory performer, the disadvantages of retaining marginal or unsatisfactory performers, why management tolerates a marginal or unsatisfactory performer. And this happens very, very frequently, by the way. Symptoms of a marginal or unsatisfactory performer, how to identify the problem, performance levels, and you're familiar with that part, reasons for marginal or unsatisfactory performance, the course of action, and the methodology by which to carry through the follow-on. Definitions of marginal performance. This is an employee that's performing satisfactory overall, but performance is slipping toward unsatisfactory or actually unsatisfactory. This is an employee that up to this point has done well, had not had any problems, and all of a sudden something happens and the employee's performance is slipping more toward unsatisfactory. The unsatisfactory performer is obvious. Employees just not complying with the key aspects of the job. When I mention the key aspects of the job, you have to go back and remember the performance plan, key aspects of that performance plan that you're going to be evaluating the employee on. Questions from anybody? Okay. Disadvantages of retaining a marginal or unsatisfactory performer. First of all, the disadvantage to the individual is it's a waste of job life. If this you have an unsatisfactory performer and they still want to continue with you and you let them, it's a wasting of his job life. Unhappiness on the job. The individual who's unsatisfactory for some reason or other probably is unhappy with the job, unhappy with for other reasons. To the church, obviously unnecessary costs, waste of the individual's time and others, Parishioners or others receive poor service or delays, destroys teamwork, lowers morale, lower productivity for the employees that are on board. You have an unsatisfactory performance they have to cover for, that kind of has a tendency to be a downer for the other employees. Inter and intra-parish and school relations suffer. You have somebody that's not doing the job, they're not doing you any favors because their behavior probably is being related to other organizations within your particular parish or school. To other employees, as I mentioned, work imbalance, that's a natural outcome. Rework is often necessary. Have an employee, unsatisfactory employee, normally they make a lot of errors or they don't do the work necessarily. So somebody has to do that. So you got to do a lot of rework to do that. The impact is on other employees' productivity, which is obvious. Now to the manager, lowers the credibility and respect. You maintain a marginal or unsatisfactory performance, the employees are going to resent that, and guess who they're going to blame? You as the manager. It leads to frustration and low manager morale. You have a problem employee and you don't know how to deal with, obviously it's going to have its impact. Lessens the effectiveness of a manager. And this comes about when there's obviously a problem employee, you've not done anything about it, the perception from the rest of the employees that you're not an effective manager. And worse, your boss may think you're not an effective manager as well. Why are marginal or unsatisfactory performance tolerated? First of all, a lot of times the manager is afraid or unsure of what to do. This comes because of lack of experience, fear of being wrong or proven wrong. You know, sometimes our ego gets in front of us and we don't want to be proven wrong or want to make mistakes or be seen as being incompetent. Effects of action, legal or privacy. Sometimes managers are afraid of making the wrong step because they feel they're going to be sued or somebody's going to complain about them. Well, the important thing to remember here is if a person follows the process and does their job the way it should be and as the way as I've presented it here in the past, they really shouldn't have anything to worry about. I have had many evaluations and I've had attorneys call me. I have had people call me telling me they're going to sue me. My ongoing dialogue is, you do what you have to do. I never shy from that because I've always been confident that I can clearly explain my actions or the reasons I evaluated an employee as unsatisfactory. Or worse yet, why I terminated an employee for non-performance. Rationalization. Sometimes we have a tendency to keep an employee on board who's not performing because we feel that person is a good person. We just have them in the wrong job and under the impression that a little more time and the person will improve. Well, that hardly ever happens. First of all, these are poor excuses for keeping somebody on board. You're not doing yourself and your organization any favors. Has family, old employee, good parishioner. Obviously, we want to be compassionate, but compassion has its limits. The employee has a family, well, he needs to think about his actions as an employee in order to keep that family going. An old employee, and again, you know, sometimes we have employees who have been with us for a long time. All of a sudden, they feel that they don't have to work anymore and they've kind of retired on the job. Well, they need to be awakened a little bit sometimes. Good parishioner. Good parishioner does not necessarily make a good employee. Feeling of not complying with ministry goals by confrontation. This is unfortunately very true with many of our priests. They feel that they're not doing their job if they have to confront somebody or if they run into a confrontation. Again, that confrontation only comes, or if it's adverse confrontation, because somewhere along the way the steps are missed. Avoidance of personal conflict. Again, do not want to upset the person, parishioners, or others. This happens very, very frequent, folks. Hard to prove a person is marginal or failing. Again, this comes about when there is little or no personal observation. I've talked about that. Poor documentation. You have nothing to stand by to be able to prove that person is marginal or failing. Again, no job description, no set performance objectives, evaluations. Think about your particular position. Are you in this situation where you do not have job description? You've not set performance objectives, as simple as they might be, or have not evaluated your employees. Difficult work pressures, a lot to do, time consuming. Sometimes managers take the position that they're so busy they don't have time to evaluate an employee or to put a performance plan in place and do all those things that they have to. That's a poor excuse. No reason for it. It's not that difficult. It's not rocket scientist. It doesn't take forever to put a performance plan in place. It doesn't take forever to evaluate an employee either. A lot of times managers do not want to admit failure as a manager. So they just continue with the workforce they have, let things slide along until it reaches a crisis level. Any questions so far? Any disagreements with what I'm telling you?
I
Feel
was
free.
wondering, Richard, if anybody had experience in any of those reasons why they didn't really confront the issue.
I doubt if anybody would admit that, but I'd like to hear if they know of anybody that they have come in contact with as fits this characterization. Anybody?
I, until somebody comes up with one. I was thinking years ago, I had an administrative assistant and I didn't have time to find somebody else. So I tolerated it.
That happens more frequently,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
even to this day. We get in a hurry, we hire anybody just because we need to fill a body in.
Yeah.
That's not a way to do it. Okay, moving on. Understanding the symptoms of a marginal unsat performer. First of all, a person is normally tardy or frequently absent. It's a phantom, not where he or she is supposed to be. You have a desk, person is seldom there, or before you know it, disappears doing something else, chatting down the aisle with a neighbor, doing something other than their particular job. Defensive, complaining about too much work, and everything is everybody else's fault. Nothing comes out good, I blame somebody else. Silence or avoidance of the manager. This is a good clue. Well, I have an employee that hardly ever talks to me. I'm wondering why. What is an employee trying to hide? Horn blowing. This means a good defense is a good offense. This is a situation where the person toots their own horn, constantly telling you how well they're doing in one particular area. However, not telling you what they're not doing in the rest of the areas that person is responsible for. So this is a horn blower. Complaining, consistent negative attitude, complaining about things that don't even relate to that particular person or that person's job, complaining about his neighbor, complaining about the manager, complaining about the organization. This is something that happens very frequently when you have an unsat performer. Disorganized, poor work habits. Of course, this is something that you should have picked up in the interview, but unfortunately that happens. People do lose a sense of organization sometimes. They pick up poor work habits from somebody else. Now you've got a problem. Excessive complaints from peers, parishioners, or others. I can tell you that often we get complaints from different organizations or different individuals. And sometimes managers have a tendency to downplay those, not focus on the fact that there's a symptom that needs to be looked at. If they're not providing parishioners or peers with the service they need, something's wrong, folks. Requires constant excessive direction. This is the employee who lacks initiative, procrastinates, misses deadlines, so you constantly be on top of them. This is where you may have to do some micromanagement. Again, not necessarily, shouldn't be that way. Any questions? Identification of the problem. How do you identify such a problem? Well, first of all, you want to list important factors, both positive and negative, about that person. The employee's performance accomplishment of objectives would be one. Manager's efforts to develop. How much time do you spend on that individual? Do you spend a lot of time coaching? Uh, Things that you've had to repeat many times. What are the skills of the employee? Do you have an employee who doesn't have the skills to do the job that they're asked to? Personal circumstances. What is behind this employee's problems on the job? Is it something that's entered into his private life that comes into being, and you have situations like family disagreements, children not, you know, attending school. There's many different situations that come up that create a problem for an employee. And what are the effects of the employee's actions on others? Is this employee taking an effect on the others that are in the workforce? You want to view the performance of this individual against the definitions of performance levels. And we shared those last week. You have them with you. And the performance levels, obviously, as you want to identify, is this person outstanding? Obviously, if you've got an unsatisfactory or marginal employee, none of these normally would apply. Very good does not apply either. Good, some things may apply, some things may not. And number 4, improvement needed. Here's where you can really identify the person. The employee is satisfactory overall in most key areas of the job, but not on everything. The employee does that which is expected, but not much else. And frequently requires a lot of direction. Rarely anticipates. Occasionally may not feel the requirements, not very accurate, may receive complaints, etc. Now, the easy one is unsatisfactory. This is a person who just flat does not meet the requirements of the job. Inaccurate, does not follow direction, and unprofessional work habits, complaints by parishioners and others. Per attitude, not my job, condescending to others, can consider rude, constantly complaining without basis, and not performing as agreed to in the performance plan. Again, this is how you determine what that level of performance is for that individual. Any questions on these? Understanding the problem. First of all, the employee's understanding. What is it? When was the last formal review? Again, you have to ask that question. When was the last formal review of this individual and what was the rating? Does the employee fully understand that his performance or her performance is slipping and is nearing unsatisfactory? Has the employee been told his or her performance is at or near unsatisfactory? If not, you need to make sure the employee understands. Last week, as I mentioned about the fact that in talking to an employee, we need to be candid. We do not need to be flowery when we do an evaluation or a review. You need to be candid with the employee and says, if I were to evaluate you now, this is how I would evaluate you. Satisfactory, unsatisfactory, good, outstanding, whatever it might be. And again, remember that the intent is not to surprise the individual at the end of the evaluation or the end of the year. We need to decide on the performance level. Is it satisfactory but slipping rapidly into unsatisfactory category, or is it unsatisfactory? Again, this is what you need to make sure the employee understands. This is where you take off the kid gloves. You need to be candid in what you deal with the employee. Why employees become unsatisfactory performers? There's multiple reasons. Personal problems, and this is something you have to look for. Health, family, one never knows. Sometimes employees are very careful about telling people what their personal problems are, and rightly so. However, when it comes to job performance, there's sometimes situations where they need to open up a little bit. Qualifications are limited or not in existence. Again, we go back to the qualifications of an employee. Character, personality, or emotional state. Sometimes you have very gruff individuals that can't get along with others, very emotional, possibly in different areas. So you have a different character that you're dealing with. Lack of direction or support by management. This is where you have to question yourself. Have I provided the necessary coaching of this individual. Work conditions are poor. What are those situations? Give you an example. One of the situations that I personally had years ago in Los Angeles, we had an employee who was very, very negative at a desk handling accounts receivable, but nothing seemed right. So I asked the employee, "Tell me what's going on here. Let's share some information." Well, I said, "The lighting in my cubby hole is not good." And we had cubbies like a lot of others. But the biggest problem was that she had asked her manager to provide her with a chair. The chair she had was very wobbly, very uncomfortable. She just couldn't do the job with that chair. That's a simple situation, but this is a true situation. I had the manager get her a new chair. The attitude changed dramatically. So it seems like a silly type situation, but it's reality. It's true. Okay. Lack of direction, work conditions are poor. They need to be fixed. Lack of motivation, poor pay or boredom. Sometimes employees are not motivated because they receive poor pay. And this is where you need to review your pay structure, see if that person is paid accordingly. Sometimes we pay an employee, bring on an employee, we forget that we're paying so much. We forget about those incremental increases that perhaps that employee is deserving of if they're doing a good job. Boredom comes from not having enough to do. Maybe we have not distributed the work correctly. We have not made the right assignments. Lack of feedback, recognition by management. Employees all like to know how they stand. We need to provide feedback frequently. If nothing else, if you look, consider the 1-minute manager concept that says all it takes is saying, "Hey, you're doing a good job. How's it going?" Just a little bit of recognition by a manager that says, "I know you're there. I know you're doing your work. Thank you very much." Sometimes we forget about that. We forget to say thank you sometimes when an employee, even if they're doing a good job. Course of action. Here's where you have to really prepare mentally. You have to prepare your course of action. First of all, you prepare operationally. The process will take time. You need to plan. Remember, this employee is either marginal or unsatisfactory. You need to prepare what your dialogue is going to be with that employee. You cannot be frivolous or very brief with this employee. You need to understand what the steps are that are needed. Prepare beforehand what will be said. Again, be very conscious of your dialogue with the employee. You say the wrong things, this whole thing could backfire on you. Anticipate possible reaction. Is this the type of employee that gets angry very easily? Is it an employee who has a tendency toward violence, which sometimes we don't know? What is the employee's anticipated reaction? Understand the possible consequences. Threat of legal action, appeal to the bishop. It's not known for an employee who is rated unsatisfactory to say, "Well, I'm going to go talk to the bishop. I'm going to see my attorney." Go for it. If you did the right things and followed the steps, you have nothing to worry about, really. Get advice from human resources. This is why I have your professional human resources person. If you have any doubts or you think you need to do something a little different, uh, get advice. One of the things that you need to understand is, or we need to understand as managers, we should not operate in a vacuum. We don't have a corner on smarts. None of us do. So there's nothing wrong with calling HR or calling the diocesan attorney and say, "Hey, listen, I need a sanity check. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going around about this the right way?" Nothing wrong with it. I have done it many times, folks. I'm not an expert. As many years as I had in management, I still do not hesitate to contact the attorney or whoever I have to get that advice. Cannot delegate. One of the things that you cannot do as a manager is delegate all this you're preparing for to somebody else. You're the manager, you're responsible. This is your job. Questions from anybody? Comments? Disagreements? Okay.
I'd like to hear from Bailey. What about approachability, time, availability?
Of me?
Yeah, like when, for people to come for advice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here to, as much as possible, to answer calls and help out. Jessica's here too, so.
Okay.
Do people come to you frequently?
Sometimes I would say typically the business admins, you guys are really good about coming up front. I find pastors often are coming too late down the road. They're calling at the end after years of going through it. So pastors on the um, call earlier.
With timeliness is a problem there.
We can help you a lot more
Yeah, and
along
this
the
is,
way than we can after things have already stacked up on one another. So
why I include this in this presentation. For those of you that are present here, it's very important. Don't hesitate to ask for help. This is the way to keep you out of trouble long term. So take advantage of your human resources person. Bend her to the wall and say, hey, I need your help. And by the way, I need your help now, not tomorrow. So this is us as human resources personnel. That's our responsibility.
Yes, and Richard, I was talking to an HR person in a diocese, and they never had an HR person up until a couple of years ago. So when she got the job, I forgot how many tens of thousands of dollars of lawsuits they had. And now she has it down to zero. So,
Well, I had to tell you that I ran into that here in the Diocese of Tucson as well. Prior to my coming on board in 2003, they didn't have an HR person. They had somebody that I was kind of filling in. So I went back in the files and looked, and just about every termination ended up in a settlement of some sort. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, 40,000. I fortunate that in all the time that I was the HR director, we only had one instance where we had to settle, and that was kind of a fluke because somebody, one of the cemetery directors didn't follow our advice. But that can happen. That'll happen if you don't do the right thing and you don't pay attention to the process. Questions on that? Anybody? Okay. So what's a course of action? How are we going to handle this? First of all, the first step would be to confront the employee, and this would be an informal review. Your sense that this employee is performance is slipping, you want to set a meeting with the employee and do an informal review. First of all, one of the things you want to do as a manager is communicate your willingness to help. Every employee appreciates that. You want to be as compassionate as you possibly can, yet firm enough to let the employee know the reason you're meeting. You want to review that job description, the performance plan. If you're going to do an interim review, don't be frivolous about it. Review the job description, at least the parts that are key, and also the key areas of the performance plan. That performance plan, you should review all the key areas. And in doing this, you tell the employee how they're performing in those particular areas. If you get to the one that they're failing in, you have to be candid, let them know. You want them to gain, you want to gain agreement that there is a problem, an agreement on the performance level of the employee. Once you point out the misgivings or the things the employee is not doing well, normally you get agreement on the performance level. And again, the performance level will be satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or marginal, whatever that is that you assess. You want to assess the ability to change performance. How much assistance is necessary? What do you think need to do to better your position? The employee must be told verbally that performance is declining and why. This is where the candidate has to come in. Unless there's immediate change, you will be formally evaluated as unsatisfactory. Remember last week I mentioned that once you put that performance plan, you want to make sure that the employee understands that's what that person will be evaluated on from now on. So again, you need to, in this case, now you tell the employee, unless there's an immediate change, you will be formally evaluated as unsatisfactory. Now remember, this employee is slipping. If I were to evaluate you now, and this is what you tell the employee, if I were to evaluate you now, I would rate you unsatisfactory or marginal or needs improvement, for example. Clearly communicate the consequences of being an unsatisfactory employee. First of all, you would be put on a 90-day probationary period if you're unsatisfactory, and be put in an what you call an improvement plan, and failure to immediately improve could result in termination. So those are the courses of action, or the course of action would be taken. Any question? Document the meeting with the employee. This is not part of the employee file. This is your documentation that you're keeping when you would interview or when you review the employee. You document it in a notebook, calendar, whatever. As I mentioned before, I always have a habit of carrying a simple spiral notebook with me whenever I talk to an employee. I just jot the notes down. That is valid in any court of law as long as you document the date, the time, and what the conversation was. Does not have to be a lengthy explanation, just a touching base on what the main points that you cover. It's extremely important that a record be kept. Do not commit to memory. Too often you find managers who say, well, I talked to the employee and they're not doing well. I said, well, did you document it? Well, no, I didn't. Well, if you didn't document it, it's like it never happened. So remember that part, very important. Immediate improvement. If the employee, once you've interviewed and improves immediately, no further action is needed. Now you have a failure to improve, okay? So the performance isn't satisfactory. So now you move to step 2. And this is an improvement plan is needed because the employee's performance isn't satisfactory. Now here you have a formal evaluation meeting with the employee. You evaluate that employee as unsatisfactory, again, using the tools that you had before. You tell them that this is the start of a 90-day period of improvement. Advise the employee that improvement must be immediate and sustained. If improvement is not immediate and sustained, advise the person he or she will be terminated. Now, in your document, you have what is called the sample improvement plan. If you will pull that, pardon me for shuffling papers, but got it mixed up here. You look at Exhibit 9, that's the performance improvement plan. It's very almost the same thing as your performance plan. The difference is that you're when making this a performance improvement plan versus a performance plan. So you'd say the performance period improvement period is September 1 to November 30th, for example. The following improvement plan is intended to assist, and you put the name of the employee, improve his or her performance as whatever the title is, in the areas listed in addition to maintaining satisfactory performance and other duties as normally expected. So what you're going to hone in on is the areas where this employee is performing unsatisfactory. This employee may be performing satisfactory in most of the key areas except 1 or 2, and those are the ones you're going to hone in on. It's recommended that a cover letter accompany the performance improvement plan, outlining your willingness, first of all, as a manager to meet with the employee as needed for assistance. And also the cover letter will remind the employee that improvement is expected immediately and must be sustained on an ongoing basis. Now, again, improvement needs to be immediate. What is immediate improvement? Well, in most cases, 2 to 3 weeks improvement should show up immediately. So that would be the time frame that I would normally consider immediate. The person does not immediately improve and sustain that improvement, then you can release that employee at any time during that 90-day period. Questions on that?
Richard, there's a question about the file being placed in the employee's file. Is that correct?
Yes, that is going to go into the employee. Once that's finalized, it's going to go into the employee's file. That's correct. Now, if the employee improves and you re-rate him as satisfactory, that would go into his employee file as well. So you have that's part of his permanent record. That answer the question?
I just want to make sure, Amanda, was that your question, what you were referring to, or Jessica?
Yes, that answered my question.
Okay, I'm going through this really kind of generalizing a lot of this. So feel free to fill in the blanks and ask me about that if you have any questions. But the important part is you're going to tell this employee that now they're on an improvement program. These are the requirements that you have, and you're going to emphasize in this particular sample, like Exhibit 9, for example, transaction analysis and processing, quantity of work, and initiative are the 3 areas that are emphasized in this. This means that these are areas that that person has to immediately improve on. Now, the other part of it is that employee cannot fall down on all the other key areas of that performance plan. Because now you've got another situation that says this employee has dug a whole lot deeper and is maintaining his unsatisfactory record. So the employee has to improve in these and also maintain their performance level in the other areas. It makes,
Richard,
yes,
can you talk a little bit too about, okay, so they start a 90-day improvement period, and you said that you could let them go at any time during that period. Can you
yes.
give some more detail behind like what types of things they might have to do to warrant like immediate termination, or, when it's appropriate to, have like a check-in? Is it a weekly thing? Just because if I'm thinking on the employee side, if I'm met with this type of feedback, it might take me, I might be caught off guard, maybe even if I don't think that I don't think there's an issue. So like talk more about like what that improvement process looks like and when it's just you cut your losses.
Okay, let me go on to the next one, the formal evaluation session. Again, when you evaluate this employee as unsatisfactory, you need to use the formal evaluation form, the appraisal form. That's the first step in making sure you document that unsatisfactory performance. Once you do that, again, my recommendation is you review with the next level of management or HR prior to the evaluation to make sure that you're on the right track. Then you present the employee with a formal plan of improvement. You want to highlight the areas where the improvement is needed. You tell them, just like I mentioned a few minutes ago, you tell them that the employee must also maintain performance in other areas. Now, you want to review all this with the employee. Must be made very clear to the employee that performance improvement must be immediate and sustained, or he or she will be terminated. Now, what does that mean? That means that in any of these areas, the employee has to show immediate improvement. And that depends on the area that they're working. For example, if they're accounts payable and they've been very lax in paying, then immediate improvement means they bring back within the limits that you set forth. If that person has to pay within 10 days or within 30 days, that needs to be maintained. So those are an example of what you would mean by immediate improvement. Sustained improvement means that over the next 1, 2 or 3 months, whatever, that person needs to maintain that improvement. Now, going back to your question, if that person, you put in an improvement plan and that person continues to go over that 10-day period or 30-day period, then that person continues to be unsatisfactory in that area. If that continues, then you have every right to terminate that employee at any time immediately. So that's the part that happens on that. Does that give you an example? That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Anybody in the group have any other questions or examples maybe they want to offer?
That depends on what the employee's doing, what their responsibilities are. No different than if a part of that responsibility is to recruit or whatever it is, and then that employee needs to immediately improve in those areas. And you as the manager are the only one that can really judge whether that improvement is true or not. It's hard. There's no cookbook that says in all cases this is what's going to happen. It depends on the employee, the responsibilities, and what you put in that improvement plan that the person has to improve on.
Mhm. So here's a curveball for you. How about when you deliver that plan and then they ask for some type of accommodation? Like, I'm running late all the time because I can't make it to daycare and back. Or maybe I have a health or a mental or physical health issue that's causing me to be late in the morning. Like, what do you do then?
I see where you're coming from. Well, if that accommodation is asked during the improvement plan, it's a little late. Up to that point, that person has not brought any situation to you that would require an accommodation. So you have to deal with this administratively, meaning you can only go by what that employee has been doing in the past. Now, if that employee wants to improve, and now if that employee has a problem with daycare or some other, they're going to have to find a way around it because you reach the point where you can't accommodate anymore.
Mhm.
Now, prior to the employee being rated unsatisfactory or marginal, if the employee comes to and says, look, I've got a problem coming in, then we talk about those accommodations. But after the fact, it's a little bit too late. And I'm sorry, but I can't help you on that. You're going to have to work that out. Is it a little bit cruel? Is it a little hard? Yes, it is. But unfortunately, sometimes you have to be that. And don't misunderstand me. I am as compassionate as anybody else. However, as I mentioned before, compassion has its limits. And asking for it when you're faced with a termination is a little bit late. You should have thought about that before. Make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
I think
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. I'm
Yeah,
just
no, you have to, and trust me, employees will try that. They'll say, well, then the reason I'm unsatisfactory is because I can't get up in the morning or I have this problem and so forth. Well, you should have thought about it. Now, part of that improvement you need to go and see your therapist or whatever to help you get over that.
Mhm.
Okay. No.
Yeah, I think your point is that this isn't going to be the first time that the employee would be hearing that they need to improve, right? You would have had those conversations multiple times with the person by the time you
Right.
get to this point. And for them to ask at this point for an accommodation is a little late. I mean, I think that's kind of where you're coming from, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah.
really a moot point at this point now to ask for that accommodation.
Richard, I have a question about the files. Maybe it's not a good question, but you put in the employees file this bad report, so to speak. But then the person is doing better and following your outline for improvement. Do you take out that bad file and just keep the new file?
No, you retain that old file.
Okay,
That unsatisfactory evaluation needs to remain in the file. The
okay,
reason for that, if that person, and let's get into the other document, dialogue. What this person needs to understand is that you only get an improvement plan and the ability to correct it one time. you do not get a second chance. So after that 90-day period, let's say that you reevaluated that employee and it's satisfactory. If that employee reverts back to their old habits and again falls into an unsatisfactory situation for the same reasons, then all bets are off. You have a right to terminate that employee for failure to maintain. And this is what you say when you say immediate improvement and maintain that. Now, if the employee falls down on some other key areas, now you got another situation that you have to put an improvement plan that's based on those areas where the employee has now fallen down.
Right,
But the original one has to remain in the file.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, early identification of marginal performance is essential. And many disadvantages, and this is a summary now, many disadvantages to allowing marginal or satisfactory performance, expensive and counterproductive negative effect on morale, impact on entire parish or school organization. Action must be taken to correct or dismiss. Now, at this point, what I'd like to make sure is that everybody understands is the different steps in the evaluation of an employee. As we covered last week, the first part is a performance plan, putting it in place. If the employee follows that performance plan that you put together to your satisfactory, all is good, all is well and good. However, the follow-on is that that employee needs to understand they need to keep progressing or maintaining that performance. Hopefully they'll improve, but they need to understand it's important they maintain that performance. This is where you cannot afford as a manager to drop the ball and take your eyes off the plate, so to speak, off the ball, so to speak. You need to, again, continue the touch and feel aspect of performance that I mentioned earlier without micromanaging, but you want to make sure that all your employees continue performing the way they should. Again, there's different ways of determining where that happens, and nowadays there's so many different statistical ways of doing that there shouldn't be any problem. But it's important that, again, if an employee falls down, that you keep in mind that something has to be done. If you want to keep your organization healthy and morale up, you need to take action against that particular employee that's not performing, because that particular employee eventually will take its toll on you as the manager, on the entire workforce, and possibly the organization, depending on what happens. Okay, and that happens more often. Just to give you an example of what happens in those situations, some of these are serious, some of them are not. Recently had an experience in another diocese where an investigation was done of the business manager because of a complaint by an employee. The result of it was that it was found that the business manager was highly incompetent, had the employees against her. Everybody hated her, but nobody, had the courage to complain other than this one individual. The recommendation to the pastor was that that person be put on a close watch because of some of the complaints that came through were that this person was personally counting money in her office, a collection that came through every week. People were known to walk in her office and see money spread out in her desk, which was a collection money. She and a boyfriend would go to the poor box and collect the money from that, take it to the office, and supposedly count it. Well, this was I want to say 2 years ago. And recently, one of the things we found that this individual is now facing charges for embezzlement and fraud, making payments. And unfortunately, this was brought to the pastor's attention. He gave her full carte blanche ability to do anything with the finances that she wanted to. Her name is on the checking account. She had free use of credit cards, debit cards. So she was making payments to herself. What I saw recently was car insurance payments, car lease insurance, car lease payments, so forth, for her own personal use. So that's an example of where The ball was dropped. The pastor had full faith and confidence in her because that's what he said when the initial investigation was done. Lo and behold, this is what happened. So it's very, very necessary to keep an eye on what's happening. Any questions, anything else, comments? Okay, well, basically that ends this session with the exception of there's some exercises before we end that I would like to go through. And Bailey, you sent those to everybody, I believe, right?
Yeah, I had sent them out.
Okay, bear with me. All right, this is open forum. Case study 1, marginal and unsatisfactory performer module. First one is, and I would ask everybody to please contribute as much as you can if you want to. Ellen is a new employee, having been hired approximately a year ago as the Director of Religious Education. Ellen is an exempt employee. Ellen has a master's degree in theology and is one of the reasons he was hired for the position. When he was hired, he was provided with a job description and performance plan, while indicating he was responsible in total for religious education K-12, and adult formation. The following is a history of his performance in the time that he has been the DRE. The pastor has observed that Alan is very good with the adult formation classes. He establishes very good rapport and people feel comfortable with him. He is responsible for elementary and high school religious education, but he has not effectively recruited enough catechists to cover all the religious classes. At times, his catechists have had to double up or to handle 2 different classes due to lack of teachers. Alan likes to work from 8 to 5, is not usually willing to substitute if a teacher is not able to come in. He feels that on the days that he does not have adult classes and he teaches 2 classes each Tuesday and Wednesday, that he should leave and spend the time at home. When catechists bring the subject of lack of catechists to him, his reaction usually is, "You handle it." Catechists as well as parents have begun to complain about his lack of attention to the religious education program. So there's several issues here. Okay, catechists, not enough catechists. People have begun to complain about his lack of attention to religious education program. He doesn't like to work hours other than 8 to 5. So what's your opinion of Alan's performance? Anybody? Satisfactory, marginal, or unsatisfactory?
Unsatisfactory.
Unsatisfactory or satisfactory?
Unsatisfactory.
Okay, what's the basis for that?
He's not meeting the minimum requirements of the job.
Yeah, he has a performance plan and a job description, correct? Anybody else have a different opinion? Yeah, you're right, that would be unsatisfactory in my book as well. Any other comments on that? Okay, case study 2, marginal.
Richard,
Yes.
he was an exempt employee. What does
Yeah.
that have to do with his performance? Would that add another piece?
No, he's an employee. He's got a responsibility based on a performance plan, whether he's exempt or non-exempt. And in fact, he's the other avenue to it. He's expected to do the job. So if he has to come in after hours, that is part of the requirement.
Okay.
And that's, if you recall back to our Fair Labor Standards Act, an exempt employee is paid to do the job, not by the hour. And this man is not paid by the hour. So yeah, that has a bearing on that.
Yes, that was my point. Thank you.
Okay, case study 2. Mary is a parish administrative assistant and has been in this position for 5 years. She's an exempt employee responsible for all aspects of the management of the office. This is all documented in her job description and her performance plan, which was presented to her approximately 3 years ago. Mary is very good at what she does. She is a very accurate typist and very meticulous about her work. Following is a history of his performance or her performance in the last 5 years. Mary is very efficient. However, she is constantly late for work. Although her starting time is 8 a.m., she normally comes anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes late. She often takes an hour or more for lunch, but leaves promptly at 4:30 p.m. Mary is considered a very strong person who likes to get things done her way. Often she gets things done, and then informs the pastor. Her explanation is that she had to act since he was not in at the time. According to her performance plan, she is required to attend the evening staff meetings the pastor holds once per month. In the last 6 months or so, she has missed 4, stating she has to be home because of her husband's health. It has been reported that she is conducting some time of business from home. Although Mary is very responsive to the pastor's needs, she is very negative when it comes to providing support to 2 parochial vicars. Her attitude is, which she has told them, my responsibility is to serve the person and to no one else. Mary at times has been reported to be rude to parishioners. She does not seems not to not have any patience when somebody is not as quick of mind as she is, and does not hesitate to let the person know. Some parishioners have been known to complain to the pastor when that happens. There is improvement, but then she reverts to her old habits after a while. Mary's last evaluation was satisfactory. What is your opinion? What is your recommendation? Is she satisfactory? Anybody?
No.
No. Okay, Amy. Is she unsatisfactory? Alexis is.
I think it has to be marginal, doesn't it? Because she was satisfactory before, so now we have to make the next step of being marginal and then see if she improves.
Good
And
point.
if she doesn't, then it's unsatisfactory and we go from there.
Anybody disagree with that?
I would agree with marginal as well, but I mean, I think there's certain aspects of her job that she seems to be doing okay, but there's other aspects where she's not meeting expectations. So it's not a total failure, but there's certainly room for improvement.
Yeah, well, apparently the pastor thought she was satisfactory the last time. So again, it would appear that marginal be the way to go with this one. She obviously has not been told about the other shortcomings that she has, that she's short and rude with customers and so forth. Sometimes as managers, we have a tendency to evaluate the person only on certain aspects of the job, not the complete job. Again, total assessment. So there's a possibility she does not know her shortcomings in essence that I pointed out here. So this is the job of the pastor or whoever her manager is to point those out. Anybody disagree with the marginal aspect of it? So
Richard, I don't like that she was not respectful to the parishioners. I would
Right.
think that that was totally unacceptable.
Typically is unacceptable, that's correct. No, but what we don't know is whether she has been disrespectful, but she's still been rated satisfactory. That's what we don't know. We don't know whether the pastor was aware and he still went ahead and rated her satisfactory. So obviously somewhere along the way, that is a missing link, not been made aware of that.
Well,
So
and then
again-
when was her last evaluation and why wasn't there a touch point at some point in time?
Yeah, we
Or
have
did
to,
they?
we have to assume that this was sometime in the last year,
Okay,
the recent one, most recent one, let's put it that way. So let me just say it's a stretch to, at this point in time, to rate her unsatisfactory because we don't have all the information that's necessary. And she was rated satisfactory. And one of the things she would have a comeback on to the past if he were to rate her unsatisfactory and ultimately dismiss her was, wait a minute, this is the way I've acted for the last 5 years. Nobody's brought it to my attention.
yeah.
Why not? So she's got a counter argument that probably would be valid in the end. Not to mention the disrespect or whatever else that has not been brought to her attention. So this is one of those that kind of a puzzler, if you will, but you just give her the benefit of the doubt, I think, in this one. Anything else? Any other recommendations on that one? Okay, case study 3. Robert has been employed as a non-exempt maintenance technician for approximately 3 years. Robert is very knowledgeable about general maintenance, heating, venting, and cooling, electrical work, and for the most part can fix most problems that come up in the parish. Robert started out in a commendable manner as an employee. He worked hard, often offering to stay and work long hours to fix whatever may have been broken. The following is a history. During his first year, Robert was an exemplary employee. He was always cordial, friendly, and was willing to help any one of the other workers who needed help. In the last couple of years, Robert has slowed down for no apparent reason. He does what he needs to do, but no more. Sometimes he procrastinates and waits until someone complains before fixing a problem. Robert is constantly complaining that he is not paid enough. He complains that if he were work anywhere else, that he would be earning twice as much as at this parish. Although no one else raises this as an issue, he is constantly talking to other employees about pressuring the pastor for a raise. Our view his pay against other employees in a similar classification shows he was actually being paid more than the others by about 10%. Robert has been known to pad his time card on occasion. In the last 6 months, Robert has left many jobs undone, although he has been informed of the urgency of a fix. For example, the bathroom faucets in the church have been constantly leaking for at least 3 months, even after reportedly being fixed. Robert has a short fuse. On occasion, he has been known to yell at other maintenance and custodial persons if something is done contrary to the way he feels it should be done. On occasion, he has made derogatory remarks toward more than one employee. On one occasion, the pastor was calling a problem to his attention when all of a sudden he got up and stated, "I don't need to listen to this," and he walked off. So what is your opinion of Robert's performance? Is he satisfactory?
Unsatisfactory.
Unsatisfactory, Tom?
Yeah, I think so. I had a experience probably about 15 years ago with a maintenance guy who kind of follows this pattern. And we'd had some corrective action plans put in place, and it was a temper issue often. And one time he came in and he got upset and he pulled his keys out of his pocket and slammed it on the desk and said, "I don't need to listen to this," and he walked off. Well, I took that as he was quitting, but I documented it anyways. And I didn't know for sure, but I decided it was a termination. He came back the next day, and I did not bring him back. I told him that I felt he had crossed a line, and whether it was intentional or it was as a temper issue, I said he was terminated, and I didn't get any argument from him. But you know, to tell your boss something like that, that's kind of that crosses the line. And I felt I just had to let him go because he had a history and it just wasn't something that was workable anymore at that time.
Yeah. Anybody else, how would you handle something like this? Any recommendations, comments?
I feel like I've noticed a trend in kind of all of these things. I mean, it seems like it's pretty far into the process of like something obviously has gone wrong in all of these case studies. Like, you know what I mean? That it's not just overnight, these people have, I mean, something's obviously, whether it's personal or something in the office, but it just seems like they're really change kind of like this one seems like a big change. That's just an observation I had, that something's going on to cause
So
it.
how would you deal with Robert in this case?
Well, I guess, what is the I mean, well, how do you come back? Like you were just saying with the last one, I don't need to listen to this. I mean, is this even work? I mean, you have to work with them, or can you take that as I quit? Do you have to progress with him? Or, I mean, you have to let him keep his job and say, well, no, you said this, but now, you know, we need to mark your fire, or this just, well, you are done.
The other thing is he padded his timesheet,
Right.
and that's time theft. And
Right.
that's grounds for termination.
Well, he's been known, that's not necessarily proven though.
Oh, okay.
Richard, I agree with Ann. It seems to me he got this way because there was no recognition. So so do we recognize people, thank them, the gratitude? It seems, you're not paying me right, you're not doing. I think he's disgruntled. Nobody recognized what he had
Without a
done
doubt,
and what he did well.
Without a doubt, he's disgruntled. However, his pay is more than their normal employee doing the same job. So pay should not be an issue here.
But sometimes it's not about pay, it's how you're appreciated.
Right. Yeah, sometimes that recognition can be part of the problem here. Just a little simple thank you or whatever, that may not have happened. However, once again, that's not an excuse for padding the time card. That's not an excuse for disrespectful. Definitely not an excuse for walking off the job. So, in my opinion, this one, I would take this as a resignation. And I would notify the employee, Robert, since you walked off the job, my impression is you have voluntarily resigned. Is that correct? He says, oh, no, I asked, I acted hastily and I was wrong and so forth. Now we get into the improvement part, okay? Now, if he continues to be haughty and says, well, yeah, I'm not going to work under those conditions anymore, and I did walk off purposely, so do whatever you have to, then I would formally notify him that I have accepted his resignation. Thank you very much. I wish you well in the future, period. Okay. Now, if he relents and says, no, I'm sorry, I got hasty and so forth, then I might consider going back and let's start over, Robert. Tell me what's your problem. Now we got into a different, because obviously he was an exemplary employee when he first started and he did very well. But he, for some reason, just started going downhill. However, nobody has told him. Now it's time to tell him. So anyway, there's two schools of thought here. The first one is accept his resignation, be done with him. The other one is be compassionate and try to give him a chance if he asks for it. Anybody disagree? Anybody have a different opinion? Okay, case study 4. This is the last one, and I will be out of your hair here pretty quick. Okay, Gracie has been employed as a secretary for 7 years. Gracie is quite efficient in her manner of working, has never been a problem employee. She always gets us work done, and her attitude has always been very positive. About a year ago, her job performance started to drop off for some unknown reason. When confronted by the pastor, she continually states that she is fine and that nothing is wrong. The following is a history of her performance in the last year. Gracie comes in late at least 3 times per week, even though it is essential that someone be at her station as receptionist to field calls from the public. When she is not on time, someone has to cover her station. Complaints have been heard from employees about this. Sometimes Gracie has been seen to doze off at her desk, particularly during slow times. When this is brought to her attention, she mentions she sometimes gets very little sleep at night caring for her husband. Gracie is responsible for the weekly bulletin. On more than one occasion, she has had to leave because she felt ill and has not been able to complete the bulletin. On these occasions, the responsibility has fallen on someone else and resentment has built up. Gracie's personality has seemingly changed as well. She is no longer the bubbly, positive person that she was. She appears quiet and sullen often. She has reportedly been rude and argumentative toward the pastor, parishioners, and others. Although no parishioners have complained, this has been observed by more than one employee. Gracie's last evaluation was very good. So what is your opinion? What's happening with Gracie? Anybody? She's obviously not satisfactory, right?
Yes, satisfactory, and perhaps she has looks like she's cares for her husband, so maybe she has he has an illness at home and doesn't know how to separate personal and work problems, and so that's why she's having those type of issues.
Yeah, that would be my assessment. There's something in her personal life that is creating the problems for her. Unless somebody disagrees. So with that in mind, how would you deal with this? Anybody? Would you ask her directly something is bothering her?
I think for sure communication needs to be implemented with her to figure out what the problem is, if it is on a personal level, if there's anything that can be done within the work environment to help alleviate some of the workload or whatever that she is going through. Just so there can be a plan for her work. So she doesn't fall into more than likely termination.
So what would you tell Gracie? How would you approach Gracie?
Um,
Remember-
approaching
Yeah,
approaching it would be a challenge, just to ask her if her family is okay, if her husband's sick, because she's mentioned that she stays up to watch him.
Okay,
Oh,
now
maybe
bear in mind that you have to be very conscious of the employee's privacy. And so it's very difficult to approach directly, asking her if she has problems with her husband or whatever. So
Confidential.
how would you do it? She's already been asked by the pastor, and she continually states that she is fine and that nothing is wrong.
Oh,
So
Let's
how would
see.
you approach what? No, this was the pastor now, you're the manager now. How would you approach her to try to get at the root of the problem?
maybe a good way to go about it was you could just state the facts and just say, here's what your performance has been in the past, and it's been very good. And we've been noticing over the last year that the performance has been dropping, and kind of name, here are the areas we see the performance dropping, and just ask, is there something going on, or is there, can you explain why there's been a change in your performance over the last year?
Yeah, this is the better approach. Again, you don't want to pry into a person's private affairs. However, what you need to start with is saying to the employee, look, your performance is dropping, it's slipping. In fact, you're slipping into a situation you're ultimately be unsatisfactory. Is there anything that you want to share with me that would help understand why your performance is dropping? You're not asking the employee to tell you what her personal problems are, but you want to find out what that employee feels and what pressure they're under. And hopefully they'll open up. Now, if she says, nope, nothing is wrong, everything is going okay, then what is your answer to that? Anybody?
Well, I think back to the kind of the point we were talking about earlier is if they aren't willing to share, even if there is something that is going on and they don't want to share that or utilize like family medical leave or anything, you have to proceed with, the discipline and all the kind of the progressive discipline steps.
Yeah, what you need to tell Gracie is, listen, if there's nothing wrong, then you leave me no choice but to treat this administratively. That means I have to evaluate you accordingly, according to the guidelines that we have, which means a performance plan and improvement plan and so forth. And you leave me no choice. Any comments on your part?
Is he just
Then if the
mentioned,
employee,
is he mentioned the, Kent, you mentioned the, family leave, correct? Is that inappropriate if you would just say, we've noticed these things are going on? Is it possible that you could offer that time, maybe take a few days to figure things out, or can you suggest time off? You have it there to use.
that's another approach that yes, would be acceptable. So something, you come in late, you're falling asleep, do you need time off? Do you need time off to reconstitute yourself or whatever? Again, the employee may say, well, yes, and then I've got this and this problem, may open up a little bit. Again, if the employee says, no, everything's okay, then we go the other route. But that would not be a bad approach as well, as long as you don't ask directly, what's your problem? So, but she has given you ample reason to point out the fact that she's coming late, she falls asleep, and so forth. So that is an opening. So depending on what she says now, what are your options? If she says, yes, I do have some things, I need to take time also, what are your options now?
Well, couldn't you just say, well, you do have this many days available, why don't we start with that? She sounds like a good it sounds like she's been an invaluable worker up to this point. So because she's going through hardships, it seems kind of like you have 90 days to shape up or you're out. Because clearly something is going on.
Well, yeah, we know that. And she's also admitted the fact that, yeah, she needs some time off. So what are your options?
Yeah, I don't know, over and above the time off, I don't know.
You have to have a couple of options. First one is, remember, there's family medical leave. Okay. Maybe this person is in a situation she needs time off more than just a day or two to take care of business, to take care of her husband. There's different reasons for family medical leave. Maybe there's some family problems at home she can't cope with. The other part is, depending on what she says, it would be a personal leave of, let's say, a week or whatever, 2 weeks, if you wanted to inform that as a possibility. And this is the dialogue you have to have with her. And then you as a manager have to make that determination when you want to give that person that leave, which would not necessarily be family medical leave, but just enough time for her to get her act together, so to speak. So those are your options. I don't think you have a situation here where you've got an unsatisfactory employee that you would want to terminate. Obviously, she's been a good employee. But the other side of it is you have your limits as well. You have to do something, and the employee has to do something to help herself as well. Maybe she's fallen into a bit of depression. You don't know. So that would give her an opportunity to decide what she wants to do. So this is one of those hazy cases that could go anywhere. But this is reality. These are the cases that come up. So anybody else have any other opinion on these? Okay, well, listen, folks, that's basically ends our session for today, unless anybody else has something else that they'd like to discuss or any explanation, anything that you'd like to discuss, by all means, now's the time to do it. Any comments? Good. adverse or otherwise. Okay, I'm going to turn this back to you, Regina. Folks, thank you
Yes.
very, very much for your kind attention. You participated very well. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you. I offer myself, if you have any questions that you want to ask that you feel Bailey Ziegler doesn't want to give you the information, feel free to call me. I don't think you run into that, but I again offer myself as an advocate for you if you have that help. It won't cost you anything except a phone call. So again, thank you so much. Regina, back to you.
Yes, Richard, thank you so much. Your examples, your practical examples, your case studies, your step-by-step approaches. So thank you very much for walking us through so many of the challenges for those with HR responsibilities. I just want to remind you about a survey. The survey link I will be sending to Bailey. Bailey will be sending it to you. Once that survey is completed and sent back to me, then I will issue certificates. I'll package up the certificates and send to Bailey, and she will distribute them to you. So let me know if you have any questions about the survey or the certificate. Just my cell phone is 703-244-5237, 703-244-5237, or you could email me. So Bailey, I'll volley back to you.
Yeah, just thank you all for participating. Thank you to NACPA for, providing this class for us. If you have any follow-up feedback, please put that on the survey that will go to NACPA as they continue to develop this program. And then I know some of you have been asking about some like the slides from today and maybe a few missing slides that were missed. So I'll make sure I get those out as well as the recordings to those of you who are waiting for those in the coming days. And then just a quick commercial, next Thursday in Albany, we're going to be doing our parish admin day. Most of you, hopefully all of you have heard about it. It used to be parish secretary's day, but since we know there's so much crossover with everyone's work, just if you haven't heard about that day, I know registration closed yesterday, but if you're interested in going, let me know, and I might know who to talk to get you into that day. It's going to be Sacramento record keeping, finance, a little bit of HR, and then hospitality. I think it'd be really good if all your parish secretaries were there, your bookkeepers were there, your business administrators were there. There's going to be a lot of valuable information and valuable networking. We've got over 80 people registered for the day. So just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of it in your roles. And if you could spread that to your staff who might be interested in case you haven't heard about it already. So that's my little commercial. Thank you again. We'll see hopefully most of you next week in Albany, and we will talk to you all soon.
Parting is such great sorrow.
Hi, everybody.
Bailey, hang on
Yeah.
for just 1 minute. We have a webinar next week, ministerial exception, November
Yes.
13th. And Jessica will send you the link, and then you could send it to everyone if they want to register for that webinar.
Yeah, I will. I'm registered with Jessica. I have a lot of questions on that exception. I feel like there's a lot of, it's a very gray area, so I'm interested to see what they're gonna say, like what the information provided will be, so.
And I find it so hard to remember. I always have to go back and refresh, and it's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah, so.
Jessica, did you want to say anything to Bailey?
There's a link in the chat that I put that's our playlist for the recordings that we have. I think there's one more recording that's about to sync into it, but I'm about to send you, Bailey, an email with that link too, so you can just forward it out to people as well.
I've got it.
And then I'll detail the dates that we have in there, but there were like 2 in October that we were on your.
Yep, I've got those. So
Yeah.
I'll make
Yeah.
sure to.
So those are the only missing ones.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, Bailey, thank you so much. And I really have enjoyed getting to know you. And
Yeah.
stay connected and don't forget Salt Lake City.
Yes, we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Yes, yes. Okay, take care.
Thank
Yes,
you, Bailey.
thank you so much.
Bye.